November 1955, Albuquerque, New Mexico. A girls' orphanage on the east side of 4th Street, 3 blocks north of Route 66, in a 2-story adobe building that has been standing since 1931. The boiler goes out on a Tuesday morning in the second week of November. The temperature inside drops to 41 degrees by noon. 17 girls between the ages of 6 and 14 sit in their coats in the main room and watch their breath make clouds in the air. The woman who runs the building has been on the phone since 6 in the morning, trying to find someone who will fix it without payment up front. Nobody will. At the counter of a diner across the street, a man in a tan Stetson and a canvas ranch jacket eats breakfast alone and watches the front door of the building through the window. Nobody recognizes him yet. Here is the story. The building at 412 North 4th Street was donated to the city of Albuquerque in 1931 by a retired railroad engineer named Horace Fitch, who had no children and no family left, and decided the building should be used for children who had no family either. It has operated as a girls' home continuously since that year. It has never been well funded. It has never been well staffed. It is run entirely on the determination of whoever happened to be in charge of it, and the willingness of that person to absorb what the budget could not cover. In November of 1955, that person is Margaret Sorrel. She is 44 years old. She came to the home in 1941 as a teacher, hired to run the classroom on the second floor for $28 a week. She has not had a raise since 1947. She has been running the entire operation since the previous director left in 1952, without giving notice. She took over the director's responsibilities without taking the title because the city office that oversees the home told her the budget did not allow for a director's salary, and she said she would do both jobs for the teacher's salary because if she did not, there was no one else. That was 3 years ago. She has not complained about it to anyone who could do anything about it. Margaret Sorrel is a plain woman, straight-backed, with dark hair going gray at the temples, and reading glasses she keeps on a cord around her neck. Her hands are the hands of a woman who has spent 14 years doing every kind of work a building full of children requires. She can fix a stuck window, patch a roof tile, reset a blown fuse, and talk a city budget officer into releasing funds he has already decided not to release. She has done all of these things more than once. She has never been able to fix the boiler herself because the boiler is a 1928 cast iron unit that requires a licensed technician and costs more to repair each time than the previous repair. The boiler went out for the first time in 1949. The city paid for that repair. It went out again in 1951. The city paid half, and Margaret raised the other half from a church collection. It went out in 1953, and Margaret paid for it herself over 8 months from her salary. It went out on a Tuesday morning in November of 1955, and the repair estimate from the one technician who came to look at it was $340. The city office said the budget line for building maintenance was exhausted for the fiscal year. The earliest they could authorize anything was January. The girls could not stay in the building until January, not without heat, not in a New Mexico November that had already dropped below freezing 3 nights running. Margaret had 17 girls in her care. The youngest was 6 years old. Her name was Rosalie, and she had been at the home since she was 4, and she followed Margaret from room to room, the way small children follow the one person in a building who always knows what to do next. Margaret spent Tuesday morning on the phone. She called 4 repair companies. 3 would not come without payment guaranteed in advance. The 4th sent a man who looked at the boiler for 20 minutes and wrote the estimate on a notepad and handed it to her and left. She called the city office twice. She called 2 churches. She called a woman she knew who ran a charitable fund out of a law office on Central Avenue. The charitable fund had already dispersed its November allocation. She was sorry. She would put Margaret on the list for December. By noon, the building was 41 degrees. Margaret put every coat, blanket, and spare piece of clothing she could find on the 17 girls and moved them all into the main room on the ground floor, which held heat better than anywhere else. She made hot cocoa on the gas range in the kitchen, which still worked, and brought it out in tin cups. She sat Rosalie on her lap to keep her warm and read out loud from a library book about horses, because that was what Rosalie had asked for, and because Margaret Sorrel had learned 14 years ago that the most useful thing you can do for a frightened child is give her something to listen to. She did not let the girls see her face when she was not reading. Across the street at a counter stool in a window seat of the Route 66 diner, a man in a tan Stetson had been eating breakfast since 8 in the morning. He had arrived in Albuquerque the previous evening and was driving west toward a location scout in California. He had taken the window seat because he always took window seats when he could, and because 4th Street in the morning had the quality of light he liked in a city, flat and honest, nothing hidden. He had watched the boiler technician arrive and leave. He had watched Margaret Sorrel come to the front door 3 times to look up and down the street. He had watched the lights in the upper windows go dark one by one as the girls were moved downstairs. He asked the woman behind the counter what the building across the street was. "Girls' home," she said. "Been there since before I moved here. Woman named Sorrel runs it. She keeps that place going on nothing, I don't know how." He drank his coffee and looked at the building. "Where are you watching from? Drop your state in the comments. I want to see how far this story reaches." He left the diner at noon. He did not cross the street. He went to the payphone on the corner of 4th and Mountain and made 3 calls. The first was to the office of the City of Albuquerque Public Works Department. He was on that call for 11 minutes. The second was to the repair company whose name he had gotten from the diner woman, the one with the best reputation in the city for boiler work. He was on that call for 4 minutes. The third call was to a man he knew in Albuquerque, a contractor he had worked with on a building project 2 years earlier, a man who knew how the city's budget authorization process worked, and who had the kind of relationships that could move paperwork faster than paperwork liked to move. He was on the third call for 7 minutes. Then he crossed the street. Margaret Sorrel answered the door herself. She was still wearing her coat. Behind her in the hallway, he could see the low light of the main room and the shapes of girls in blankets on the floor and chairs, and he could hear one of them coughing. He took his hat off. He said he was sorry to bother her. He said he had been watching from across the street and wanted to know if there was anything useful he could do. Margaret looked at him. She was a woman who had spent 14 years dealing with people who wanted to help but could not, and people who could help but would not. And she had developed a precise instinct for which kind she was looking at. She looked at this man for a moment. "Come in," she said. "It's warmer in the kitchen." They sat at the kitchen table. She told him about the boiler and the estimate and the city budget and January. She told him in plain, flat language without asking for anything, because she had not yet decided there was anything to ask for. He listened without interrupting. When she was finished, he was quiet for a moment. "The repair company is coming at 2 o'clock, he said. "Today. They'll have the part. It'll take about 3 hours. Margaret looked at him. "I told you what the estimate was." "I heard you." She looked at her hands on the table. "Sir, I am not in a position to accept charity for this building. These girls are in the care of the city, and there is a process. It's not charity." He set his hat on the table. "The city is paying for the repair. I just helped the authorization move through faster than it would have on its own." He looked at her. "January is too long." Margaret was quiet. She looked at the hat on the table, then at him. "How did you do that? The authorization. That takes weeks." He looked at the window. "Sometimes it takes a phone call to the right person." He looked back at her. "The repair is covered. The technician will be here at 2. What else does this building need?" Margaret looked at him for a long time. He did not look away. "The roof on the east side," she said finally. "It leaks above the second classroom when it rains hard. I've patched it twice myself, but I don't have the right materials, and I can only get up there safely in dry weather." He took a small notebook from his shirt pocket. He wrote something in it. "What else?" she told him. "The east roof. 3 windows on the upper floor that had warped in their frames and would not close fully. A section of the floor in the main room that had gone soft. The hot water heater, which was not broken yet but was making a sound that meant it would be." He wrote all of it down. He did not comment on any of it. He wrote the way a man writes when he means to do something with what he is writing. When she finished, he closed the notebook and put it back in his pocket. He stood up from the table and picked up his hat. "Someone will come for the roof and the windows next week, Monday or Tuesday." He put his hat on. "The floor and the water heater. I'll need a few days to arrange the right people." Margaret stood. She was a straight-backed woman, and she stood straight even now. "Mr." She stopped. She did not know his name. She had not asked, and he had not offered it. He looked at her. "These girls," she said, "they don't have anyone to do this for them. I've been the only one for 3 years, and I have never once asked a stranger for help because I didn't think a stranger would come." She paused. "I want you to know that I know what this is. I'm not going to pretend it's something smaller than it is to make it easier to accept." He looked at her for a moment. "You've been keeping 17 children warm and fed and in school on a teacher's salary for 3 years," he said, "while also running the building." He put his hand on the back of the kitchen chair. "That's not nothing. What you're doing here matters more than you've had anyone tell you it does." He touched the brim of his Stetson. "Let somebody help for once." She looked at him. Her jaw was set and her eyes were steady, and she did not say anything for a moment. Then, "What's your name? I want to know it." He smiled slightly, which was not something his face did often. He picked up his hat. "Tell the girls the heat is coming," he said. "Should be warm in here by supper time." He walked out through the hallway. Rosalie, 6 years old, was sitting on the bottom stair wrapped in a wool blanket, the library book about horses open on her lap. She looked up at the tall man in the tan hat. "Is the heat coming?" she asked. He looked down at her. "Yes, ma'am. Few hours." She looked at him seriously, the way small children look at people they are deciding whether to trust. Then she went back to her book. He walked out the front door and down the steps and across 4th Street. He got into his car and drove west on Route 66 toward California. The repair technician arrived at 2 o'clock as promised. He had the part. He had the boiler running by 5:15. By 6, the building was warm. Margaret Sorrel fed the girls supper and put them to bed, and sat alone in the kitchen afterward with a cup of tea and did not move for a long time. A crew came the following Monday for the roof. 2 men, good materials, half a day's work. They fixed the windows the same afternoon. The floor was repaired the following week by a carpenter who charged nothing and explained only that a mutual friend had asked him to come. The hot water heater was replaced in December by a plumber who gave the same explanation. Margaret Sorrel never learned his name from him directly. She learned it the way everyone learned things like this, slowly and sideways, from a city office worker who recognized the voice on the phone call, from the repair company dispatcher who knew the contractor, who knew whose favor had been called in. By December, she knew. She did not tell the girls for a long time. She told them only that some people in the city had helped, and that this was the way things were supposed to work, even when they usually didn't. She ran the girls' home on 4th Street until 1971. The city finally gave her the director's title in 1963 and a salary to match it, 8 years after she had taken on the work. She retired at 60. Rosalie, by then 22, came back to Albuquerque from college in Las Cruces and stood on the front steps of the building with Margaret on her last day, and they had their photograph taken together, which was not something Margaret usually allowed. John Wayne drove on to California and made his location scout and did not speak of the building on 4th Street to anyone. He died in 1979. The city of Albuquerque maintained the girls' home until 1987, when it was folded into a larger county facility. The adobe building on 4th Street still stands. It is a law office now. In the archive room of the Albuquerque Public Library on Copper Avenue, there is a folder in the city records collection labeled Girls' Home, 4th Street, 1931 to 1987. Inside the folder, near the back, is a maintenance authorization form dated November 15, 1955. It is a standard city form, 2 pages, signed by a budget officer whose signature is almost illegible. The authorization is for boiler repair, emergency basis, same-day processing. In the notes field at the bottom of the 2nd page, someone has written in pencil, in handwriting that does not match the budget officer's signature, "Called in by outside party, public interest." No name, just those 4 words. The folder sits in the archive. The afternoon light does not reach it. But it is there, and the form is still in it, and the pencil marks are still legible if you know to look. If this story reached you, do me a favor, pass it on. Share it with a teacher in your life. There are more stories coming.